All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jeff Weiner. I'm the Director of Public Policy for the Center for Children and Youth at Jewish Family and Children's Services. Before we get started, I'd like to walk you through a few of the features for today's Zoom event. Number one, chat will be disabled for this event, so we'll be using the Q&A box. If you have any questions throughout the program, you can find the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen and ask the question there. We've also enabled closed captions for today's event. So if you'd like to view them, click the live transcript button on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then click show subtitle and the closed captions will appear. So we're very excited about tonight's community conversation on school climate and social emotional learning, or SEL. This program is designed and presented by JFCS's Center for Children and Youth in collaboration with our event partners. And I want to thank our partners: the San Mateo County Office of Education, WestEd, Mind Brain Parenting, for helping us put on this great program we have in store for you all tonight. So before we get started, just a few words about the Center for Children and Youth. Center for Children and Youth is a division of Jewish Family and Children's Services, one of the oldest and largest human services agencies in the nation. JFCS provides caring services to Bay Area residents of all ages and faiths. CCY provides parent education, clinical services, professional training, and youth development programs throughout the Bay Area and beyond. We also advocate with government, schools, and communities to create environments in which all young people can flourish. We are guided by our knowledge gained through extensive work in the field of child development and by our Jewish values. Our aim is to improve the lives of children for the next generation and to affect cultural change that positively impacts children and families. The Center for Children and Youth offers supports for parents, for all you parents out there, schools and educators, to ensure that every child has the resources to reach their full potential. We provide high quality trainings for teachers, workshops for parents, mental health counseling and assessments for students, and Holocaust education for all in the school community, among other programs and supports. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Director Scott Gilman, who leads San Mateo County Behavioral Health and Recovery Services. It's an honor and a privilege to have Scott join us for tonight's event. Director Gilman is a late replacement for Supervisor Pine, and we're very fortunate he could be with us tonight because he's been a longtime champion for mental health for young people. And creating a safe, destigmatized environment is something he cares deeply about. And honestly, he's worked his whole career on it. So as I said, Scott Gilman leads the county's Behavioral Health and Recovery Services Division. BHRS provides services for children, youth, and families and adults and older adults for prevention, early intervention, and treatment of mental illness and/or substance abuse conditions. He has over 30 years of successful healthcare leadership experience across diverse organizations. Early in his career, Scott was a licensed clinician providing clinical services to individuals with serious and persistent mental illness, as a case manager, and as a member of an assertive community treatment team. He went on to manage a variety of substance use treatment and prevention programs, including as executive director of Shiawassee Community Mental Health in Michigan, and later as the chief executive officer of Network 180, the Community Mental Health Center for Kent County, Michigan. Scott earned his bachelor's degree in psychology from Saginaw Valley State University and his master's in administration from Central Michigan University. In his spare time, you can find him on the water, boating, and spending time with his grandchildren. Director Gilman, we're so glad you're here. Now I'll turn it over to you to say a few words about the reason we've gathered tonight, which is to talk about the importance of school and home environments that foster kids' social emotional learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Just a quick sound check. Are you hearing me?
We hear you.
All right, thank you. So a few comments. And first of all, I just want to pass on Supervisor Pine's apologies for not being able to be here tonight, but he's ill, and I'm happy to step in and welcome you tonight. A few things that I want to say, to parents and those that are attending tonight about the environment that we face. I've been working with kids in mental health for almost 30 years, and in my career, we've never gone through anything like a 2-year pandemic, and we've never seen the degree of trauma that our kids are experiencing. Not only trauma, social isolation, really, really starting to see a pandemic surge of mental health problems. And so first thing that I want parents to understand is that when you have a situation like this and your child is having some problems, it's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. They're going to need help. I'm so glad that you have the panel tonight to give you some, in the weeds suggestions on how to deal with things. The degree of violence that we're seeing in schools, the degree of kids just not showing up, disappearing, is gone. The other thing that we're seeing in some of our parts of the community are schools were the only safe place for some kids in some of our families. It was the only place that they could get a decent meal. It was their safe haven from violence, from drug abuse, from dysfunctional families, from sexual abuse. And we're seeing all of those incidents of crime go up, according to Steve Wagstaff, our prosecuting attorney. So if your kid's having trouble and you're a parent and you're worried about that, the first thing you need to understand is kids having trouble in this kind of an environment is normal, and they need some assistance. The second thing that I want to outline for you is how do you access that service? And you've got a great organization sponsoring this tonight. Most of the kids in San Mateo County have insurance. If you don't have insurance, then you come to my system, the public system, where we deal with Medi-Cal, or uninsured. We take folks with uninsured. But the majority of San Mateo County children have insurance. Flip your insurance card over and look where mental health services are, and get a referral. The other thing is, if you work for a large company, most have EAP services that will help you and connect you to services, for your family. It's hard right now, and you have to be persistent. Most places, most psychiatrists are booked up because we're having a surge. So you have to be persistent. The second big group of people, and I'm so glad to hear you're talking about educators. Just like those of us in health, there's been minutes over the last 2 years that we've been heroes. There's been more minutes that we have been just evil demons for not doing what the public wanted us to do. And it varies on the latest health order, or the latest variant that comes out. And teachers are in that boat. Teachers are getting blamed for so much right now. Every teacher that works has to be a full-time therapist. Teachers are dealing with all of those issues that I talked to you about before, all of those issues of food and making sure that kids are okay and safe, and reporting, the abuses that we're seeing. So as much as our children need help, our teachers need help, as much as we can provide them. And I can't see any parents on here. I don't know who I'm talking to, but if you go after a teacher and start yelling at them, please remember that they are really caught in the middle of this too. Running the entire county mental health system, there's so many answers that we don't have questions for in health. We don't know the answers because nobody knows the answers, and we're caught in the middle. So please, please, please take care of your teachers. Anything that you can do to support them, resources, training, materials, because they're full-time mental health therapists right now. And so with that, I want to say thank you for allowing me to make some comments this morning. I apologize that I can't stay on your call because I have another meeting I have to jump to. But I will, at this point, just say thank you. Remember how to access services, and I hope that this is a great discussion tonight. Jeff?
Thank you, Director Gilman. We really appreciate it. As you underscored, it's a challenging time for everyone, students and teachers, and of course for parents as well, who are trying to manage a million things, and also be there to support their kids. So what you had to say really underscores how urgent it is right now for parents and schools to work together and to focus on these issues. And as I said, I want to just thank you for being here, for bringing attention to SEL and school climate tonight. And I hope your words will be a call to action for all of us here. So thanks again. All right, so we've got a full agenda planned for you tonight, and here's what you can expect. First, we're going to hear from Jenny Wu. She's an expert on all things parenting for SEL, and she has a lot to teach us about how families and schools can partner to build kids' social emotional learning and their resilience. And then we're going to hear from Leslie Pointer, who leads the state's Cal Schools Survey, which paints the picture of school climate in California for all school districts in California. Leslie works with schools and communities to understand their school climate data and to use that information to improve the environment for kids. And during Leslie's presentation, we'll have a few minutes to go look up the climate data for each of our districts and schools, and then we'll return and spend some time discussing its implications with Leslie and Jenny. So that's the agenda for tonight. And with that said, let's just jump right into it. Our first presenter, as I mentioned, is Jenny Wu, who we're very lucky to have with us. Jenny Wu is a Harvard-trained educator, a TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of Mind Brain Parenting. She's worked with children and families as a school administrator, with college and graduate students as a career coach and an instructor at UC Berkeley, with new and seasoned employees as a human capital consultant and an executive coach in Silicon Valley, and with older adults as a cognitive science researcher. Jenny conducts research in social emotional learning, and she teaches the Emotional Intelligence Certificate Program at the University of California, Irvine. Jenny is the creator of a series of award-winning emotional intelligence games, 52 Essential Conversations, 52 Essential Relationships, Critical Thinking Skills, and Coping Skills. And her games won the Parents' Choice Awards, they won the Mom's Choice Awards, and the Tillywig Brainchild Award. And they are used by parents, educators, and therapists in 50+ countries. So Jenny, thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. And it's really a pleasure to be with all of you tonight. And really, like many of you on the call, I'm also a parent. I have an 11-year-old and 9-year-old twins. And do you mind if I access the slides, please? Thank you. So what you see here might look familiar. And this, I have to confess, describes my household this past month perfectly. And this was an observation made by my younger son. One day he said, "Mommy," he looks around our house, "this is just like the I Survived book." And for the parents, teachers of especially elementary schoolers out there, you might be familiar with the I Survived book series, right? The book series on natural disasters, on war. And really, in my context, my youngest son was referring to the fact that my daughter had tested positive for COVID a couple of weeks ago, and shortly thereafter, my oldest tested positive. So between isolating her from her brothers and then somehow changing the plans, isolating everyone, and on top, as an educator, I teach at the university level. So sort of working, juggling, homeschooling, everything, it was a mess. And, you know, I'm sure many of you are feeling this way or perhaps have been on the same boat. And I want to just really, you know, take this opportunity to acknowledge just how much of an emotionally trying time it is for us adults, as parents, as educators, and our children. And so thank you for taking the time to learn about the ways to support the social and emotional needs that our children and ourselves so desperately need at this time. So as Director Gilman mentioned, you know, we're approaching the 2-year mark on the pandemic. And in fact, the journalists have coined this as the generation pandemic because it's becoming such a long haul. And it's a way of describing this collective experience and trauma that our little ones and the young people are going through. So, you know, I was just talking to friends who work in preschool and elementary school levels, and they were telling me how they were just sort of taken aback by the fact that now sort of in the classroom, sometimes kids kind of just get up and leave, or, you know, because they're so comfortable with being on Zoom in the past year, they didn't know how to sort of operate in the classroom level. And then today, earlier, I was talking with a teacher friend who teaches 9th and 10th grade, and he was commenting how, you know, this semester, he was surprised that his students really now have the maturity level of 6th and 7th graders, right? Director Gilman mentioned kids not showing up, right? It also includes not turning in assignments and things around that. So you can imagine with this widespread school closures, social isolation, cycles of spikes and variants and cases in our socio-political issues, right? And especially for those from underserved communities. We've heard about food and supply scarcity, parental unemployment, right? Abuse. These things have really, truly impacted our children in tremendous ways. And, you know, I hate to say this, but also in many ways that are yet to be apparent. So as you know, I teach at a UC institution, and what I'm showing you here is actually the emotions that my incoming freshman students have expressed in terms of the 3 emotions they would like to work on. They would like to get better at handling. And so here you see stress, anxiety, fear, loneliness, sadness, frustration, impatience, irritability, disappointment. And some of you may notice that there's happiness on here as well, right? And that's in the context of students telling me that they like to understand how to be happier because sometimes they just feel so numb. And, you know, we teach our children as educators, as parents, we're very involved in terms of building these important knowledge and skills, right? To have them for readiness of tomorrow, you know, even coding Pythons, you know, all these extracurriculars. But if you think about it, right, the true skills are such as decoding our own emotions and truly understanding how to communicate what we need, right? How to cope and adapt to life's difficulties and how to be resilient. These are the skills that are not being taught in school and that we as parents really want to have a handle on, especially nowadays, to help our children. And that is truly why we need to come together as parents, teachers, and community partners to work together to equip our children and again ourselves, right? We heard about the teacher burnouts with essential social and emotional skills and the learning resources that are needed to cope adaptively and to come out of this pandemic healthy, resilient, and inspired. So you are here, so most likely you have heard of the term SEL, which stands for social emotional learning. Some of you may have seen this wheel before, and this is made by the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. It's one of the leading think tank organization and research organization here in the nation that lays out the social and emotional learning standards that many of our school districts and states are in the process of adapting to. And this also lays out what us parents can do at home. So high level, you see sort of 5 competencies here in terms of how we can support our children and building their knowledge, skills, and attitudes when it comes to understanding themselves and handling their emotions and communicating that. So the first one is self-awareness. And that is our ability to recognize and understand our feelings, our thoughts, our behaviors, right? And understanding who we are and building these healthy identities. And the second one is self-management, which is our ability then to regulate our emotion and set goals in life. And then, so those 2 are more of the intrapersonal skills. It has to do within ourselves. And then we have social awareness and relationship skills, which are the interpersonal skills that we hear so much, right? So it's that ability to empathize with others when we hear about social skills, right? Social cues, reading people, that is social awareness. And then also very important is how to help our children to start and maintain healthy friendships, working in teams and being able to handle conflicts, and that is relationship skills. And when you put it all together, it's about making responsible choices, right? So that is decision making, making good choices in everyday life. And that is sort of one of the key goals that we have as parents. And in the context of just, some of the other, say, buzzwords we've heard these days, right? And I can assure you that social emotional learning, while you hear it so much more these days, it is not by all means just buzzwords. It is here to stay, especially given the impacts, implications of the pandemic. So some of you on here might have heard of growth mindset. That is here in the Bay Area out of Stanford for Dr. Dweck's work, right? It's about how we view intelligence, right? If we believe that we can improve with effort, right, then we do better. And research has shown that over and over again. But research has also shown that, how we view emotional intelligence, right? For those who believe that emotions, our own emotions, can be practiced and improved, they also have been shown in research to do better in life. And I'll share a little bit more of research for the next slide. Another one you may have heard of a lot is grit, right? Grit sometimes is attributed to sign of resilience, right? Being able to handle pressure and persevere. But I'm here to tell you that in my humble opinion, I truly believe that social emotional learning is even more important, and it encompasses grit, right? Social emotional learning enables our children to be able to self-reflect in this process and to really truly know when to ask for help, right? That making mistake is good, is okay, right? It's a sign that these are the things you can learn to do better, and they need to also understand, like ourselves, when they need self-care. And so SEL is about having that maturity to not just be gritty, but to work smart by leveraging their strength, their needs, and understanding their true aspirations. So a little bit on the research of SEL. By now, we have tons of years of research around this. In fact, there was a meta-analysis, which is a collection of the many 200 plus of individual research that shows that, and this was looking at nearly 300,000 students in kindergarten through high school. And what it found was that these students who went through school-wide universal SEL programs, they actually had an 11 percentile point gain in their grades and test scores. So what this really tells us is that SEL has better outcome, provides better outcome in terms of academic performance. And one of the really interesting and just inspiring thing to see out of this research is that this type of results was consistent with all demographic groups, people from all socio-demographic backgrounds. And so what it says is that it supports positive development of students across diverse backgrounds. And socially, we know it decreases behavioral issues and drug use. There was an SEL intervention, for example, done in middle schools, and research has shown that schools with these SEL initiatives were 42% less likely for those students to participate in physical aggression. And psychologically, Director Gilman mentioned, right, better mental health, higher levels of well-being. And this is so incredibly important at this stage because half of the mental health disorders arise by the age of 14. And professionally, 8 out of 10 employers identify these skills as the most important to succeed, yet the hardest skills to find in candidates. And having been a management consultant, having been a recruiter on different campuses, I can certainly attest to that. But the problem is 4 out of 5 teachers have noted on national surveys that they need more support to address students' SEL, social emotional development. And bear in mind that this survey was conducted before the pandemic, right? So you can imagine what the state of affairs is now these days. So how do we support our children, right? I'm going to give you some tips right off the bat. I think looking at it, developmentally for our children. Now, the data in terms of the neuroscience, the latest advances have shown us that our children's brain actually don't quite develop until mid-20s. And this is why, dealing with behaviors, dealing with big emotions for us parents is so hard than dealing with math facts or spelling words, right? Because it's a lot more complicated. And it turns out that the part of the brain that develops and matures very last, as you can see in the picture, the numb blue part, right, is actually towards the front of our forehead area. And that is our prefrontal cortex. And this is what I call sort of the CPU of the brain, or the air traffic control section of our brain, or the rational part of the brain, right? Is where we rationally make decisions, control our impulses, right? And making good choices and prioritizing what needs to be done, and presenting that in our actions and behaviors, and the things that we say, right? But unfortunately for us, this is the last part of the brain that is being developed in our children. And one of the earlier maturing sections, the more primitive part of our brain, is actually, what I call our emotional center. And rightfully so, because this has to do with our survival needs, right? So when we experience emotion like fear, anger, those are the things that are actually cueing us to do something, right? If we are fearful of something, then we get into the fight or flight type of, or freeze type of scenario, right? And so it teaches our children to sort of react, in such way. But because these big emotions are so highly reactive, unfortunately, it hijacks our ability to rationalize. And this is where 1 minute we can be marveling at our children's maturity, saying, some big vocabulary word and deducing, reasoning something. And the next minute they're on the floor having a tantrum for something that is like trivial, right? And that really is how it come into play. So the takeaway is we really need to check our expectations with our children, right? Some of these phenomenons are really neurobiologically driven, they're developmental. And the second one is that along this process, we do need to help our children to learn how to perceive, to give them the language to be able to label their emotions, to articulate it in such way that we can hear them and help them, right? So to express those needs and then to regulate their emotions accordingly. So that is social and emotional learning. And research, again, has shown that students thrive when they're supported by a network of adults working together to create the supportive environment, right? And that includes from the home to the school to the extracurriculars and back, right? And it really starts with intentional planning and understanding of social emotional learning. And this means, anywhere from the top here at the California Department of Education level, to the district level, to the school level, to the classroom level, and again, to your household level, right? Setting priorities and understanding what your child needs, what your student, what the cohort needs, and then being able to implement these systems, policies, and programs with those big pictures in mind, right? To support our students and the adults. And then in return, like the surveys you're going to see for positive school climate, for example, we need to be able to measure and have accountability set in for these continuous improvement. So an example of a school that I've worked with that has done SEL really well, right? They've really strategically kind of labeled and defined what SEL means for their school environment. And this is fully transparent, right? Parents know it, staff know it, teachers know it, right? Down to the person that is answering the phone, in the mornings or dropping off logistical matters. And using this, they created multi-year SEL initiative, and they fostered this type of culture of care that emphasized on acceptance, growth, and collaboration for parents and teachers and administrators. And, and it's really, I have to say, it's just as the mindset as it is for the action that you do for SEL, right? It's changing how you define what teaching means, what learning means, right? And it's making it inside and out, not just getting A's, right, on the assignments. And so also, I want to emphasize equitable learning, right? To understand the community needs and being able to integrate that into school. So these are definitely some of the things to think about for the school environments that you're in. And a little bit more specifically, right, what you can do in terms of family engagement. Now, I can tell you that this has a profound effect on students' SEL. And research again demonstrates that when evidence-based SEL programs at school, when that also extends into your home environments, they are way more effective. And so, as parents, so there are 3 questions that you can really ask your schools to help be involved and ensure that there are structures involved in continuously improving the SEL partnership with families and with schools. So the first one is, does your school have multiple channels of ongoing communications? Right, with families. So how often do schools communicate to families? How transparent are there? Are there town halls, workshops, newsletters, right? Is there an SEL resource center that provides these mental health and support, right? So how can we understand, ways to partner with the school in order to support your children, right? And it's important to bear in mind that this type of communication is not just a push communication. It's really a two-way communication, right? It's about being able to provide transparency, understand what your school's doing, but at the same time, can you provide input, right? Can you add on to the unique cultural heritage of your home, to integrate and enrich that for the school environment? Are you being listened to, right? And that leads into our second question. Do families participate on the SEL team, right? And that is also go into, can we define SEL collectively and have these common language, right? Both at home and the community and in schools. And the third question is, does the school provide meaningful opportunities for all families to learn more and to be able to contribute? So you can see that these questions are very much overlapping, right? And that really is a part of this continuous involvement and improvement. So a way to do that is understanding what SEL looks in your child's classroom in terms of is embedded in the lessons, how does daily activities work, and to understanding your schools, right? Are there initiatives, programs, and events going around emphasizing these types of SEL skills and that culture of care? And then at the district level, are there strategic plans? Is that being communicated, and how is it being measured? Another resource I want to share with you is that my dear friend Jennifer Miller, who runs an incredibly helpful website. I encourage you to check it out. It's Confident Parent, Confident Kids. And I believe Jeff will send this out as a resource. And so there is a rubric on there that's called Parent Heart and Head report card. And it's like a 2-3 pager rubric for parents to use in assessing the strength of the social emotional environment at your school. And so some of the examples of the areas include, thank you, Jeff. So it's in the chat, include student ownership. Does your student have an ownership in how they learn in the classroom? Are there opportunities for collaborative learning, right? And how are schools supporting our teachers who are so stretched thin these days, right? And what does school sense of belonging look like? Right? Can you see it in the classroom? And what are the policies and disciplinary actions, right? Are there clear expectations? And are there support meeting these expectations? It also goes into parent partnership, intervention support. So feel free to check out this really useful checklist to see and determine what school is, is the best fit for your child, and really identify areas where you can help out. Okay. And then at home, what can we do, right? You can support SEL at home by inviting your children to explore emotions instead of shutting it down. Role modeling is my #1 advice. It's all about building relationships, using strength-based language. Help your children build confidence, right? And then the last one is being able to apologize. I think these days we are all so stressed, right? It's totally okay to make mistakes. In fact, by apologizing, you can model empathy and vulnerability, and really just being kind to each other, and especially yourselves. So with that said, I want to share with you, feel free to check out more resources like lessons and handouts on mindbrainparenting.org. And thank you so much again for having me tonight.
Thank you, Jenny. I really appreciated hearing that, especially I think you made it really clear tangibly what SEL looks like at home and at school. And I hope that was useful for those folks on the webinar. These are all the things Jenny mentioned are things that you can use to start a conversation with your child's teacher, with your school principal, with the district staff. These are all specific practices and policies that are considered best practices for SEL that you can use as sort of a roadmap to reach out to your school and hopefully, co-create an environment that's friendly for kids and builds resilience in kids. And I'll at the end of the webinar, I'll provide the link again and a couple other resources that you can use. But I just want to thank you one more time, Jenny. That was great. All right, so now we're going to move to our next presenter, Leslie Pointer. And we're very fortunate to have Leslie with us tonight. Dr. Leslie Pointer is a WestEd Research Associate, and she's the state coordinator for the California School Climate, Health, and Learning Survey System, which is the largest statewide survey of resiliency, protective factors, and risk behaviors in the whole nation. It's something that almost every public school system, every public school district and system in California uses. And Leslie's expertise assists schools in basically analyzing this data and connecting it with practices that they can implement to create safe and supportive school climates, both for students and for staff. And she focuses on implementing those practices from a variety of cultural and linguistic backgrounds, making them culturally competent, things that all schools can apply to their unique communities to improve SEL and school climate. She's developed and facilitated numerous professional development and data workshops on creating a safe and supportive school climate, as well as in the education of the whole child from a strengths-based position. And Leslie has conducted a number of original research studies, authored several published education articles. She's published in an edited book. She's published and edited a book, and she's presented at local, state, national, and international conferences. Leslie received a PhD in curriculum and instruction from Arizona State University. So Leslie, thank you very much. Welcome. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me. And if we can go ahead and put the slides up, that would be great. Fantastic. So I am delighted to be here with you. And what we're going to talk about tonight is what the kind of data is that we collect, what and why of the Healthy Kids survey data, the staff survey data, and the parent survey data. I'm going to engage you in a little bit of prediction with the about survey items. We're going to look at the actual responses to those survey items, and then we're going to discuss how you can look at your own district and county data and the implications of that. So let's just get started right away. It's the what and the why. This is where you can see our, whoops, let me go back one. This is where you can see the screenshot from our website that talks about what kind of services we have, what kind of surveys we collect. And hopefully the slides will work and I can show you. Let me see if it's going to show me a little bit. Oh, for some reason it's not showing exactly the way I'd like it to, but in the grayed out section, it talks, one of the reasons that we collect this data is because there are already laws and policies on the books that require this data collection, but it's also very useful. So some of the requirements are for the COVID-19 relief and school reopening funding, for suicide prevention. All districts that that serve grade 7 and above should have a prevention, intervention, and postvention policy. There's an anti-bullying policy, and if your district doesn't have an anti-bullying policy, they should, and it should be posted on the website, and this includes cyberbullying. And then also with there's been a real focus from the California Department of Education to focus on school climate and family engagement. Then, of course, there's also the tobacco use prevention and education funds where we collect data on things like vaping. So let's go to why this is important. What we know about learning is that if kids are hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or scared, they are not going to be able to learn. And one of the ways that we think about this, is we think about this by asking questions on how kids are when they come to school. And the way we want to do that is through the California Healthy Kids Survey, but we also have some questions that we ask for staff and parents. And I want to get you involved right now with a little bit of prediction. And the way I want to do this is that I'm going to ask Pamela in just a minute to put up some polls. And I'm not going to give you very long to think about it. I want you to just, with your gut level feeling, what percentage of students in grades 5, 7, 9, and 11 experience, for example, chronic sadness? And I'm going to ask you to just do a quick guess on this. And the reason for that is that we all have these internalized ideas about what's happening in our schools and with our kids. But until we actually ask the kids and ask the staff and ask the parents, we don't really know. And the California Healthy Kids Survey, the staff survey, the parent survey, those are all wonderful tools to be able to do that. So, Pamela, let's do the first poll. All right, so here's the question, and you'll need to scroll down and to get to all 4 questions, and I'm going to give you a little extra time because I'm explaining it, but what I'd like you to do right now is answer the questions. What percent of 5th graders in the state experience chronic sadness? 7th graders, be sure you go down to 9th graders and 11th graders. And I'm going to give you 7 more seconds. Ready? 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, Pamela, stop the poll. Excellent. Now let's go to question 2. All right, so for question 2, what percentage of the students felt capable of solving problems? So ready, set, go. And be sure to scroll down to the other grade levels. And 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And if we were in person, I'd say pencils down, but go ahead and stop that poll. And now let's go to question number 3. What percentage of students have ever experienced self-efficacy? So, ready, set, go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Okay, let's stop that poll. And then here's another one. What percentage of students in the state have ever vaped? So ready, go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right, let's stop the poll. Now for number 5, I want to know what percentage of students felt academically motivated. And we're actually thinking in the last school year. I probably should have mentioned that, but the last school year during the pandemic. And we're looking at statewide. All right, ready, go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And now I want to ask you about the staff. What percentage of the staff said that students were academically motivated? All right, ready, go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's stop the poll. And then now I want to ask you same question, but what percentage of parents said that students were academically motivated in the last school year? Ready, go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And then finally, the last question we have is, what percentage of students said they had one adult at school who really cared about them? Ready? Go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide, and I want to ask Pamela to put up the chronic sadness question, the results from poll number 1. What did we see? So what percentage of 5th graders in the state experienced chronic sadness? The predictions were anywhere from 0% to somewhere 51 to 75% for 5th graders. You can get an idea for 7th graders, and then we look at the 9th graders where there was a higher percentage checked for 9th graders, and then about even for 11th graders. And what did the survey actually say? So in 5th grade, what we see is, and we'll hide that poll now, but for 5th grade, what we see is that in the past year of the 5th graders that participated in the survey, 15% said that they experienced frequent sadness. And that is compared to the 2-year statewide data of 2017 to 2019, 12%. So for 5th grade, that number went up a little bit. But if you go over to the larger graph where we're looking at chronic sadness, you can see that the percentage of 7th grade, 9th grade, and 11th grade that experienced chronic sadness, that went up pretty dramatically. Whereas in the past for 7th grade, it was 30%, it's now 35%. When it was 33%, it's now 41%. And then almost 50%, almost half of our 11th graders experienced chronic sadness. Something I just want to highlight on this one, that when we look at optimism, we see that in 7th, 9th, and 11th grade, just as chronic sadness has gone up, optimism has gone down. And so that's probably not very surprising given what life has been like during the pandemic. So let's show the results of poll 2, please. And in poll 2, this was felt capable of solving problems. And we'll just do a quick scroll through of where everybody was sort of all over the place, but somewhere around 51 to 75%, or 26 to 50%. So 50% of our kids saying that they felt capable of solving problems. That was the prediction. Let's go ahead and show poll number 3 as well. And then felt capable, oh, that's poll number 2. Let's do one more, poll number 3. There we go. They experienced self-efficacy, that they were able to handle things. And we're looking at 26 to 50% seems to be the prediction for 5th, 7th, and 9th grade, and then 51 to 75% for 11th graders. And let's see what the survey says. When we're looking at what the survey says, what the kids actually said in 5th grade for problem solving, before it had been almost 70%, but in the 2021 school year, problem solving dropped down to 58%, indicating that kids probably felt like they didn't have a lot of control. If you look over at 7th, 9th, and 11th graders, less than half of our kids felt like, or right at half of our kids, felt like they had the ability to solve problems. And compare that to 58, 55, 56%. When we look at self-efficacy, there's not a whole lot of change from the pre-pandemic years, which was 80%, to the pandemic year. But when we look at it for 7th, 9th, and 11th grade, we see that there is a pretty significant drop. So none of this is probably all that surprising. But let's go on now and let's look at vaping. And let's see the results from the poll for vaping. So the prediction was looking at 5th graders, their main prediction was 0 to 25%. We actually don't have the 5th grade data up here, but I can tell you that it is less than 2% of 5th graders. For 7th graders, we're looking, the consensus was somewhere between 25 to 50%, and then it's kind of evenly split for 9th graders and somewhat split for 11th graders. But let's look at what the data actually said, and what the data actually said is that in the past 30 days of when the students took the survey, only 2% of 7th graders reported vaping, 4% of 9th graders, 7% of 11th graders. What's interesting about that is the dramatic drop from the previous year. Then when you look at lifetime vaping, and that means that have they ever vaped in their lifetime, only 4% of 7th graders during the pandemic year had engaged in vaping ever in their lifetime. 11% of 9th graders, which makes sense because they're older, they might have started sooner, and 20% of 11th graders. But all of those are a dramatic drop. And one of the things that we are seeing is that vaping is inherently a social activity, like all substance use. When kids are at this age of development, especially the 7th, 9th, and 11th grade, secondary grades, and they're starting to figure out who they are, and they're filled with this anxiety, and they've come up against the edge of all that they can handle. For example, at schools when there's under a lot of stress, and then the easiest thing they can do is engage in substance use, and they have an instant community. But what we're seeing is that during the pandemic year, which are the blue bars, kids were not as engaged in vaping because they weren't in social settings that promoted that. So just as the chronic sadness went up because they weren't in social settings, the vaping went down. And I think that's a real indication that we need to pay attention as adults about how to help kids engage with each other in respectful, and productive, positive ways. So let's go to the next slide, academic motivation. So if we could put up the poll for academic motivation. That's number 5 for the student. And just do a quick look at how academically motivated students were during the pandemic year. So 50% is pretty much what everyone on this call that participated thought. So when we look at 5th grade, we see that 79% of 5th graders felt academically motivated. That's a 10 percentage point drop because 88% of 5th graders during the pre-pandemic years felt academically motivated. And then if you take a look at academic motivation here, 66, 61, 58, it has dropped. It was in the 70s for all 3 secondary grades, and it has dropped down to the 50s and 60s. So let's put up poll number, the staff. When we look at the staff data, we see that we have 50%, 26 to 50% saying that the staff said, so at least half the staff, said that they, the people on this call thought that the staff said that kids were academically motivated. So let's see what the staff actually said. And when we look at staff being academically motivated, what we see, and then it's a little bit hard to see because the picture won't blow up for you, but students being academically motivated, we're looking at 26, 29, 30, 32. And now let's look at parents. That last poll from number 5. And the percentage, the guesses here were 51 to 75%, or 50 to 50, 75, 50, 75, 50, 75. So let's look at what the data actually says, and were students actually motivated to learn from home. And so those of you that guessed around 50% of parents thought that kids would be motivated to learn from home, you were right. So that parents tended to be a bit more optimistic about kids being motivated to learn, okay, from home. And then finally, this is the slide that is most important to me. And let's go ahead and put up the last poll. What percentage of kids say that they have one adult at school that really cares about them? And the consensus on this call is 50% of kids, evenly split for 7th graders, only 25% of 9th graders, only 25% of 11th graders. And what we see is that in the pre-pandemic year, 73% of 5th graders said they had an adult that really cared about them. And in the pandemic year, 76%. Not a huge change, but somewhat surprising. It was same with the 7th graders, 63% during the pandemic year compared to 61%. And then you look at 9th and 11th grade, 56 and 60%. Basically, these numbers have not moved. And this is where I want to give a big shout out to the teachers and the principals. They are the ones that have held things together so that we did not lose ground. That's the good news, and that is a shout out to all of the adults who worked so hard not to lose ground while our kids have been going through the pandemic year, last year, the remote learning year. The discouraging news for me, though, is that we've actually hovered at these numbers for 2 decades. So that means about 40% of our kids come to school without being able to name one adult who really cares about them, listens to them when they have something to say, and notices when they're not there. So that tells me that's an area of growth for us. So let's go to the next slide. Now, I want to give you an opportunity to take a look at your own data. So I'm going to share it in this, I believe Jeff is going to put this link in the chat, and you're going to have a chance to go and look at your own data. And so what I want to do here is share my screen and let you see how to look at your own data. So the first thing that you're going to be able to do is look through your, to see if your district even has a report. So if you click on this and you can go to the county, and so I'm actually going to look at for San Mateo County, for example, and let's see what is there. And let's do all reports. And so when you come up, when you do this, you will see here's the county, here are the districts. It tells you the year of the report. And so, for example, at Bayshore Elementary in 2020, 2021, there's a student report at both the elementary and the secondary level. And it shows you all the years going back. Let's go to Belmont Redwood Shores. We see student reports here, and we see the year before Belmont Redwood Shores had also a staff report. So if you wanted to look at what staff had to say. And for example, let's go down to, let me just scroll down to, let's see, there's Menlo Park. 2021, there's only a secondary report. If we go down to San Bruno Park, for example, for the 2021 school year, you can see that there was a staff report and a secondary student report. So that's one place that you can go when you click on that link, is to search LEA reports. The other thing that you can do is when you click on the reports tab, then you go to the public dashboard. And here on the public dashboard, you can look at it in a different way. And what's exciting about being able to look at it this way is that you'll be able to disaggregate your data. So I'm just going to go to San Mateo County, and you can also look up your district this way. And I'm actually going to look at caring adult relationships, and I'm going to, this is what we see for San Mateo County. This is in the pre-pandemic years. This is not the pandemic, the pre-pandemic year. So we see 7th graders, 64% said that they had an adult who really cared about them. 9th graders, 62%, and 11th graders, 65%. This is again for the county. And maybe we want to go a little bit deeper. So why don't we look at that disaggregated by race and ethnicity? And when we do that, we can see where the differences are. Which students are feeling most connected to school by having a caring adult relationship at school, and which students don't have caring adult relationships at school. The other thing you can do is look at trends over time. So, and you can just take a look at it by if they've stayed stable, if they've moved in any way. So it gives you a lot to play with. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give you about 5 minutes and I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and we're going to give you about 5 minutes to go to that link and take a look at your own data, and we'll talk to you when we come back. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. If we could just go ahead and put up the slides again. Fantastic. So I just want to give you a couple of thoughts about why the caring adult relationships is so important, and also some thoughts about what this means for supporting our students. When we look at the years past, the 2017-2019 statewide data, and we do have a new statewide data sample coming forward in for the 2019-2021 school year that will be out later on this year. But if we go back and we look at that, and we look at the percentage of kids who said that they had a caring adult relationship with one adult at school, then we also saw that they were less likely to experience chronic sadness. And I just want to emphasize here that we're not talking about a caring adult relationship anywhere in their lives. We're talking about one adult at school that cared about them, and they were much less likely to experience chronic sadness. When we look at suicide ideation for grades 7 and 11, for example, they are much less likely to say that they have seriously considered suicide if they also say they have a caring adult relationship. And then look at vaping. Kids are less likely to say they've engaged in vaping if they have a caring adult relationship. So let's go to the next slide. So all those things that we would like to go down when kids have a caring adult relationship at school. Now look at all the things that go up when kids say they have one adult at school who really listens to them, cares about them, and notices when they're not there. Kids experiencing optimism almost doubles in grades 7, 9, and 11. Kids who feel connected to school also almost doubles for kids who say they have one adult at school that really cares about them. And then look at academic motivation. Before we looked at it in the 17-19 school year, 2-year period, and we saw that it was around 70%. But when there is an adult who really cares about them, when kids perceive that there's an adult who really cares about them, almost 80% of our kids say they feel academically motivated. So why does this matter? And it's because adults are the ones that can help kids move to their prefrontal cortex. So when you're looking at the brain stem and the reptilian hindbrain, if kids are experiencing trauma like they have this past 2 years, one of the ways that that shows up is they stay in that fight, flight, or freeze state. And even if they are in that fight, flight, or freeze state, even if we can actually regulate their bodies and get them out of that, they're still not going to be able to operate in their prefrontal cortex. They're not going to be able to operate in their forebrain until they feel like they are loved and connected and supported. So what this means is that as adults, when kids come to school, having experienced this trauma, the first thing that we're going to need to help them do is regulate their bodies. And the second thing that we're going to need to be able to do is to make sure that kids feel connected with one adult at school. That's why it is so critical that every student have one adult who really cares about them. And then finally, once those two areas of the brain are satiated or working in the ways that we want them to, that kids can move out of those areas of their brain, that's when they can learn something from this. So I believe now it's time for us to have questions, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff for that. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Leslie, for that presentation. That was wonderful. I really appreciated at the end too, that you really making the connection between caring adult relationships and all these other things that the surveys are measuring. I think that that's relationships are really the thing that underpins everything we're talking about tonight when it comes to SEL and mental health and climate. And honestly, academic performance, which you pointed out with the connection to academic motivation. It all starts with relationships at school and at home. And that's, I think, something that's easy for everyone to understand, but sometimes hard to put in practice in a school when a teacher has a lot of students and is dealing with so many different issues, especially today, now more than ever. But I think it's a thing that parents and teachers and everyone needs to focus on and really put at the center is relationships. And that's the thing that's going to help kids be resilient through this time. And it's also going to help them catch up on their learning loss. So thanks for emphasizing that connection in particular. And I love the presentation. So with that said, we've got about 15 minutes left. It's time for Q&A. And thank you for everyone who put your questions in the Q&A box. One more reminder to add your panelist questions if you haven't yet and you have a question, to add it to the Q&A box. And if you see that there's a question that was already asked that you want to know the answer to, also give it a thumbs up so that we know. And so I'll welcome Jenny back. And I'm going to go through the questions and we'll present them to our two experts. And Leslie, Jenny, whoever, kind of feel free to just chime in with your answers. No need to go in order. And I hope we'll kind of have a somewhat of an organic discussion here. So the first question, and there's two that are sort of closely related. How can parents get this data for their school district? I think that was asked a little bit earlier in the presentation before we all took a break to look up our own climate data. But it's also related to this other one from Becky, who asks, are the county or state results truly representative? What if some districts don't participate? Should we really focus on our own district data reports? My understanding, and Leslie, maybe you can elaborate, almost every district does participate. So the state results are a good snapshot statewide, but by no means do they tell the full picture of what's going on in your district and at your child's school. So that's really where you want to use the website that we posted the link to continuously check on your own schools and districts' climate data. And if they haven't uploaded their data, which honestly right now with everything everyone is going through, including staff at districts, it may be a little bit delayed. What you may want to do if you don't see the most recent results up is get in touch with your district and ask them, just mention you haven't seen it posted on the dashboard yet, but if they have a copy and they wouldn't mind sending it to you, I think that would be a good first step to get a sense of what's going on in the here and now in your own district, or even more specifically in your child's school.
So
I let me hand it over to the experts to kind of answer that more thoroughly.
I was just going to say, let me jump in on this. Well, First of all, hi, Becky. It's nice to see your name in the chat. And second of all, I will say that you're right, Jeff. The statewide data is representative, and not so much because every district, just about every district participates, but because our statisticians work really hard to make sure that the data is weighted and is accurate. We have a representative sample that is a statistically drawn sample that we work really hard to make sure is representative of the state. The countywide data, the same thing. Our statisticians work really hard to make sure that the data is weighted appropriately so that it is representative. However, as Becky, you probably know, it's actually for change at the school site level and at the district level, your local data is the most useful data. And the data that's publicly available is the district data. And those dashboards are not updated by the districts. They're actually updated by WestEd, and they are updated usually in January. But with, as Jeff said, with COVID, it's hitting our staff too, and so things are a little bit delayed, but they will be uploaded. However, that said, like Jeff said, if you want to reach out to your district or school and ask if they have the most recent survey data in PDF form, then they might have it before it's been, because we always release it to districts and schools anywhere from 6 months to a year before it's publicly available, because we want to give teachers and administrators the opportunity to review it before they start answering questions about it so that they're prepared. So that's how, and so the answer is, in short, yes, it's representative for the state. Yes, it's representative for the county. And no, it's not really helpful if you're going to actually be making change in your own school or district, because you really want to look at what's happening at your local level. But the state and county data gives you an idea of where your school and district might fit in the greater context.
Thank you, Leslie. All right, the next question, and this one also relates to the data. What do you think explains the difference between parents, staff, and student responses on the same questions?
I am so glad that you asked that question. And here's the thing. When we look at the data at the school site level or the district level, and we say to, for example, with caring adult relationships, when we look at that question and we say, you know, do you have a teacher who really cares about you, listens to you, and notices when you're not there? And it's right around 60%. But then when you ask staff and parents, you might expect that the parents would say what the kids say. Right around 60% of parents say that there's an adult who really cares about them and listens to them, their student, and notices when they're not there. But that's not the case. The parents are much more aligned with the staff, because the adults know they care about kids. It's that the kids don't always perceive it that way. So what we're talking about here is a difference of perception. And that is typically what accounts for the difference between what the kids say and what the adults say. And identifying where that gap in perception is what is critical to actually making change.
Thank you again. That makes total sense, of course. All right, well, next question. Schools are so overwhelmed that they can't begin to implement SEL at this time. Any suggestions?
Well, I certainly hear you. There is the ideal, right? What's on paper, and there is definitely the reality of things, especially now. And, you know, as you've heard loud and clear, right? This caring relationship is truly key, and that doesn't require a manual, a huge program, right? In order to implement that, I think it's about first recognizing that parents and teachers are really on the same team, right? We're here to provide the care, the unconditional love for our children, and so I think it's more of that mindset, right? As if you're a parent, right, to be able to allow your kids to make those mistakes, to perhaps emphasize academics in the context of learning, making mistake and learning some more, and to ask them questions to see if their teachers are sort of holding the similar mindset, and to be able to communicate during your parent-teacher conference, or maybe pick up, drop off, or emails, right? To just kind of being able to state whether it's concern or your sort of approach. And again, that is also why it's important to ask and seek out your school to see whether there is this two-way communication, right? To be able to communicate these things. But to be honest, yeah, you don't actually need a program to legitimize the implementations of SEL. It's that culture of caring, compassion, and connectedness, and it starts with adults. Another thing is, you know, I'm all about anytime, anywhere support. So you can, you know, feel free to go on my website and check out just things you can do in the car, at home, talking to your teacher. those type of dialogues, I think, go a long way.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay. Can you talk about the intersection between SEL and mental health? Any research you know that addresses this issue?
Okay, so I guess I'll start. Leslie, feel free to add on. I have a lot of passion in this because this is my area of research. Very much, I feel like and mental health is really focused around, it has this connotation around being clinical and those negative emotions, right? When we talk about mental health, we've seen, the stats on depression, suicide ideation, this and that. But again, SEL is really about focusing on the positive and the negative, and it's promotive, it's preventative, and it's about fostering the safe and caring environment amongst adults and peers. So it's more of a environmental setting, ecological, almost like that culture base. And in terms of the research of the intersection, so I am currently doing this research, so I'm telling you it's hot off the press. I research more in adolescents, so teens and those who are going into college. And very much I look at their psychological distress, how they cope, right? And what I'm seeing is that learning about social emotional that intelligence and they so through research I see that they have more strategies in their toolkit, so they're able to implement different coping strategies in response to the challenges they face, and whether it's coping about seeking social support, focusing on reframing how they are experiencing certain emotions, or problem solving, so making good choices. And then also, there's this stigmatism involved when you talk about mental health disorders and illness. And what I find is that students tend to emotionally suppress a lot of the things. So you got people who are unaware of what they're feeling, and you got people who are suppressing what they're feeling, but how it manifests is very similar, and it's self-blame, it's this feeling of unhappiness, and so social emotional learning gives you the skill sets to be able to acknowledge, admit, and then to cope, to do something about that. So that's an intersection point, but research of what I'm seeing is definitely it promotes and improves well-being and mental health.
Great, thank you so much. We are quickly running out of time and have a bunch of questions left. I'm going to take a stab at answering just a couple of these, and then we'll finish out with one final question for our panelists. So just very quickly, what are some SEL programs that panelists can recommend for K through 8? The two most famous and popular that I'm aware of are Second Step and Ruler, but there are many, many, many others. And so I'm going to drop a link at the end of the webinar to CASEL, which is the organization that Jenny mentioned earlier. They have a program guide, and it's basically like a consumer report style report where you can compare different SEL programs that are out there and figure out what might be the best fit for your school. So I'll drop that link in the chat. Will the websites and resources mentioned during the meeting be emailed to attendees? I'm going to drop them in the chat, so you'll have them right here. And then finally, if the data results are concerning, what can we do? What I would really emphasize you do is reach out to your school, reach out to your school's principal, maybe even reach out to your district staff, and you can get their contact from your district's website, and use the data to start a conversation. And understanding, of course, that everyone is struggling right now, including district staff, including teachers and principals. And so to have a little bit of empathy, which is something we've been talking about a lot today, but to point out what you're concerned about, and again, use the data as a conversation starter. That's what I would advise. So the last question for our panelists, can you address the gap in perception by different ethnic groups of students? And Jenny, Leslie, either one of you or both, feel free to take this one.
That's a big question and way bigger than can be answered right here, right now. But I will say that schools tend to focus and support students that are mainstream. And by that, I mean they are white and middle class. And schools, the whole curriculum tend to be set up that way. The teaching staff of the schools is 80% white. And so it's hard, I think, for a person of color to feel as connected to a school when they don't see people who look like them, that there may not be people who have had their life experiences, that they don't find a comforting place to go where they don't have to put a mask on and pretend to be someone that they're not. And so that is typically a very difficult experience. And one of the things that we have not yet done as well as we should is to recognize that schools do privilege a particular background and a particular socioeconomic status, a particular perspective. And until we can really identify that and name that that's what schools expect, then our students of color are often going to feel not as connected to schools, to teachers, to curriculum. There are many wonderful teachers and staff who are really beginning to wrestle with this, and they're starting to recognize that the things that we've always done, that we just assume are the way they should be done, that actually is only serving one group of students and not actually serving all students. So one of the things that I recommend when you look at this data, if this were your school level data, what I would recommend is saying, okay, if we want to see a change in overall school climate, then let's start with the group of students that have the least connection to an adult or least connection to the school, because by focusing on those students first, it'll have a ripple effect out to all of the other students. And when you focus on those students, then you're really listening to them, you're going to hear what they need in order to feel connected to school and feel connected to adults.
I just really want to add on quickly. Well said, Leslie. You know, I think one of the trends we see in terms of family engagement is that those who advocate for their students tend to be the mainstream parents, right? And so what is unheard in terms of voices is advocacy for the marginalized students and their families. So I think I would encourage you to, you know, not only advocate for your children, but really advocate for the village, the community that you are in. And, you know, I was just speaking on an anti-racism panel a couple of months ago to educators and parents, right? And, you know, I think it's about being heard and acknowledging that there are disparities instead of shushing, you know, your child when they notice something, right? And again, this goes with emotions, right? It's not one of those, shh, don't talk about this, you know, suck it up, right? It's about acknowledging, vocalizing it, right? There's tons of great resources, but certainly this, again, is another mindset. And we need to recognize that there's a difference between kindness, niceness versus compassion, right? Versus really doing something about it. And you have the power, all of you on this call, to do something and say something about it.
Thank you. Very well said, both of you. Okay, we've reached the end of our time. I want to thank each of you for joining us for this conversation tonight on this very important topic. And we're glad you decided to spend your evening with us. I know you could have been doing 100 other things probably, so thank you. As you probably noticed in the chat, I've dropped a few links for tools and resources that families can use. Hope you'll find these helpful. and you can use them as tools to advocate with your school and district. So I'm just real quick explanation. The first one is the Heart and Head report card from Confident Parent, Confident Kids, which Jenny mentioned earlier in the presentation. It's basically a rubric or a checklist that you can use as a parent to assess the strength of SEL and school climate at your school. So you can take this to parent-teacher conferences, you can take it to back to school night, you can use it as a conversation starter with your teacher or your principal, and it's basically a list of best practices to look out for in schools that really do a great job of promoting social emotional development. And then the second tool, and we've posted it in both English and Spanish, is from CASEL, and it's the SEL discussion series for parents and caregivers. So what this is basically a discussion guide. It's organized over 10 sessions, and it's basically a script for community conversations that you can create in your own community that focus on SEL and parenting. So you can gather together a group of interested parents, if there's others like you in your district or your school, and use this discussion series to facilitate a discussion with parents, and you could even involve teachers or individuals from the district as well. And it's just a great way to kind of structure the conversation and again, start these important conversations that hopefully will lead to changes in your child's school and in their district. And then finally, the CASEL program guide, which I mentioned earlier, which you can use to compare different SEL programs and figure out what might be the best fit for your school or your district. And then I've also dropped in the chat email addresses for myself and for our two experts. Please feel free to reach out to any one of us. If you want suggestions, advice, just connect. In particular, you can reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help you kind of brainstorm on ways to start a conversation with your child's school. We can discuss how you might think about engaging. And I'd love to hear from you if you're interested in doing something like that. So feel free to email me. And then finally, I just want to extend a thank you one more time to our terrific speakers and to our event partners, the San Mateo County Office of Education, WestEd, Mind Brain Parenting, and the San Mateo County Behavioral Health and Recovery Services. All of these organizations are doing crucial work to build supportive environments for kids. And we're very grateful to have them here today. So that's it for tonight. Thank you and enjoy your evening, everyone.